Welcome to Beverly Unitarian Church Online Worship. My name is Jennie Cottrill. I am a worship associate, and I am so glad to welcome you to worship today. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation of children, youth, and adults of many races, religions, secular identities, genders, sexual orientations, abilities, educations, life experiences, and traditions. Here we celebrate a diversity of beliefs, striving always to make space for more. All of you are sacred, and all of you is sacred. You are welcome here. Whatever your past or present is like, we invite you to walk into the future with us. Like other Unitarian Universalist congregations, we affirm 7 principles, which are not doctrine or dogma, but rather our shared values and moral guide. To learn more about these principles, please visit the website of our denomination, www.uua.org. Our minister is the Reverend David Schwartz. Today we are fortunate to have many speakers, or storytellers rather. The Myths, Legends, and Folktales service has been a tradition of ours for the past several years. While this is the second year we have not held it in person, when we do, we place the chairs in a big circle with our chalice at the center to simulate the atmosphere of an outdoor campfire around which human beings have been telling stories for generations upon generations. Today's service harkens back to the ancestral storytelling traditions of many cultures, and the hymns will be simple and chant-like to simulate simple communal singing that is also designed to be sung without accompaniment around a campfire. We especially welcome visitors and hope you'll stay for virtual coffee hour after the service on Zoom, using the link that will be shared at the end of the service. We look forward to the day when we will be able to meet you in person. Although we currently remain distanced physically, we can stay connected. To get more involved, check out our Facebook page and our website. Contact the office to sign up for our monthly newsletter and weekly Friday email blast, and to be connected to Reverend David for pastoral care. And now, let us join together in spirit and prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. 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 Come, yet again come.
Our opening words this morning come from The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell with Bill Moyers. Myth basically serves 4 functions. The first is the mystical function, realizing what a wonder the universe is, and what a wonder you are, and experiencing awe before all this mystery. If you lose that, you don't have a mythology. The second is the cosmological dimension, the dimension with which science is concerned, showing you what the shape of the universe is, but showing it in such a way that the mystery again comes through. Today, we tend to think that scientists have all the answers, but the great ones tell us, no, we haven't got all the answers. We're telling you how it works, but what is it? The third function is the sociological one, supporting and validating a certain social order. And here's where the myths vary enormously from place to place. It is this sociological function of myth that has taken over in our world, and it is out of date. But there is a fourth function of myth, and this is the one that I think everyone must try today to relate to, and that is the pedagogical function of how to live a human lifetime under any circumstances. Myths can teach you that. I light this chalice that is the symbol of our faith. Please join with me in reciting the words for lighting the chalice as they appear on your screen. Flame of fire, spark of the universe that warmed our ancestral hearth, agent of life and death, symbol of truth and freedom, we strive to understand ourselves and our earthly home.
Friends, will you join me in the words of our covenant? Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Trustworthy traveler. Abdul Qadir was born a long time ago, in a small village. His mother loved her sweet little baby with his great big eyes. When he was old enough to play, she sent him outside with the other children. He loved watching them. Sometimes they would play games a little, like tag or hide and seek. Other times they would make wheels out of bent sticks and use other sticks to roll them along the sandy streets of town. Abdul rarely joined in their games. Mostly, he liked to watch and wonder. Perhaps he wondered, how many grains of sand are there in the desert? How far away is the sun? How many turns of the wheel make a cubit? Questions, questions, questions. His mother brought him to one scholar and then another, so that his insatiable curiosity might be satisfied. He learned arithmetic and geometry from one, calligraphy and poetry from another, and philosophy and ethics from a third. Still, Abdul Qadir remained curious and full of a longing to learn. If only he could go to Baghdad and study there at the university. But Baghdad was far away. His father had died, and neither he nor his mother relished the thought of him going so far from home. Besides that, they were poor people. Even though university tuition was free in those days in Baghdad, to travel there was expensive and dangerous, with many thieves along the road. The only safe way to travel would be to hire a camel and join a caravan. This would cost far more money than they had. Abdul didn't feel he could ask his mother for such an indulgence, and so he put his dream aside. Abdul's mother was relieved, and yet she didn't feel quite right about this. She knew how gifted and good her son was. She thought that if he could study and learn more, a good boy like Abdul would be even more capable of making the world a better place. She took on as much needlework and washing for others as she could manage. She scrimped and she saved. Eventually, she had enough money to arrange for Abdul to join a camel caravan traveling to Baghdad. She made the required payment and carefully sewed the remaining 40 silver dinars into his coat. It would be safe there. Abdul's mother kissed him on his forehead and offered a few words of wisdom. Remember, my son, you must always be kind to others, and you must always be honest. Then you will live a good life. Abdul bowed in agreement and gratitude before he left. Sitting astride a camel was a new and exciting adventure. Abdul began to wonder, how many camel strides makes a cubit, and how many cubits is it to Baghdad? How can mountains rise out of the desert? Why does the moon change its shape? Questions, questions, questions. On the third or fourth day of their journey, a band of thieves ambushed the caravan. They grabbed jewelry and reached into the travelers' pockets and purses to steal all their coins. Abdul had no purse, and the bandits found nothing in his pockets. The thieves had many silver coins, but still they were not satisfied. Brandishing their scimitars, they demanded, "Anyone with more jewels, riches, or dinars, speak now." The entire caravan was quiet. Abdul calmly stepped forward and stated, "I have 40 dinars." The thieves looked at the skinny boy with his homespun coat. "You!" they laughed. They checked his pockets anyway, then laughed again. "You wish you had riches." Abdul solemnly took off his coat and showed the thieves where the coins were hidden. They stared at him in amazement. One of the thieves began to try to tear the coins from his coat, but the second thief stopped him. He held the coat up in front of Abdul and said, "We would never have known there were coins in here. Why did you tell us?" "I'm a boy who keeps his promises, and I promised my mother that I would always be honest." The thief turned to his companion, and the two whispered together with great urgency. Finally, without a word to the travelers, the second thief placed Abdul's coat on the ground. The first thief poured all the coins and jewels and riches stolen from the members of the caravan onto the coat. The two men then turned on their heels and left. Abdul quietly returned the coins to their rightful owners. Soon enough, they remounted their camels and continued the journey to Baghdad. There, Abdul enrolled in university, where he studied for many years. Eventually, he became an imam, a great scholar and teacher. People still tell stories about him to this day. As for the thieves, they were so inspired by Abdul's honesty and courage, they gave up their thieving ways and began to work for the good of all. As for his mother, I like to think that her son visited her often. Thank you.
Ballads are a traditional medium for storytelling in the British Isles, and the tradition came over into the U.S., especially in Appalachia. Just as told stories change over time, the tunes and words of these ballads and folk songs have changed in many places. You'll hear many, many different versions of the same song. I will sing us one of these ballads that you may know as a Christmas carol. While it involves the nativity story, it describes an incident that would have happened earlier, so it seems fine to sing it now. Versions of the Cherry Tree Carol go back at least to the mystery plays in the English Midlands around 1500, and actually the roots of the story go much farther back than that. The story imagines what might have happened when Joseph first discovered that Mary was with child. The version I sing is from Kentucky. When Joseph was an old man was he. He courted Virgin Mary, a queen of Galilee. He courted Virgin Mary, a queen of Galilee. When Mary and Joseph were walking one day, here are apples, here are cherries, enough to behold. Here are apples, here are cherries, enough to behold. And Mary said to Joseph, so meek and so mild, Joseph, gather me some cherries, or I am with child. Joseph, gather me some cherries, or I am with child. Joseph rose in anger rose he. Let the father of the baby gather cherries for thee. Let the father of the baby gather cherries for thee. my mother have some cherries, a low down cherry tree. Let my mother have some cherries, a low down cherry tree. And the cherry tree did bow down to the ground. And Mary gathered cherries while Joseph stood around. And Mary gathered cherries while Joseph stood around. Then Joseph took Mary all on his right knee. Oh, what have I done, Lord? Have mercy on me. Oh, what have I done, Lord? Mercy on me. And Joseph took Mary all on his left knee. Pray tell me, little baby, thy birthday will be. Pray tell me, little baby, thy birthday will be. On the 6th day of January, my birthday will be. When the stars and the elements shall tremble with glee. When the stars and the elements shall tremble with glee.
Good morning, or this afternoon. Today's folktale is called King of the Cats. Young Peter Black was a good man, but everyone said he had one big fault. He loved to tell wild stories. Peter was the sexton at the church of St. Thomas the Reliever, and there in the little town of Tabby-on-Thames, he stayed on the cottage behind the church, right next to Father Allen's house. Many were the jobs he'd held before that, but with his wild stories, he'd managed to lose every one. Father Allen had warned him, "Peter, this is the last job you're likely to get in this town. If you want to keep it, your wild stories must stop." One night Peter couldn't sleep. He tossed and he turned, and last got up to make himself some tea. But when he glanced out his window, he saw the windows of the church ablaze with light. "What in the world?" muttered Peter. "There shouldn't be anyone there this time of night. And how'd they get in anyway?" Peter pulled on a coat, crossed the yard, and quietly unlocked the back door. As he crept through the vestry, he heard a sound from the church. "Meow, meow." "Sounds like a cat," murmured Peter. "But I never knew a cat to light a candle." He peered around the curtain hung at the church entrance, and what he saw made him gasp. There was not one cat, but hundreds of cats, of every size and coloring. They filled the pews, and all of them sat upright just like people. On the steps to the altar, a big black cat, the biggest cat Peter had ever seen, was kneeling with his head bowed. Standing above him, with paws upraised, was a black cat in bishop's robes, intoning, "Meow, meow." An altar kitten approached with velvet pillow, on which lay a small golden crown. The bishop lifted the crown and solemnly placed it on the kneeling cat's head. The church exploded with cries of "Meow, meow," and Peter didn't wait to see more. He raced back through the vestry, back to his cottage, where he jumped into bed and stayed trembling under the covers till morning. Bright and early, Peter was over to see Father Allen. The priest was reading in the conservatory, his black cat Tom curled up on his lap. "Good morning, Peter," said the priest. "What brings you here so early?" "Father Allen, I came to tell you about something terribly weird in the church last night." I saw these lights and went over to check and heard a meow. Meow, said the priest's cat Tom. Yes, just like that, said Peter. And when I looked, there were hundreds of cats in the church. And there was this one big black cat, and he was kneeling in front, and the bishop was crowning him. Father Allen was looking at him sternly. Peter, do you remember what I told you about wild stories? Of course I do, Father. Then let's have no more of this, all right? But, Father, listen, Peter. I have an errand for you. Will you walk over to Brambleton today and deliver a message to Father Rowan? Peter would, and Peter did. But he didn't get to it till late afternoon. And by the time he started home, it was already dusk. He decided to take a shortcut cross country. He was halfway through a meadow and up to a stand of trees when he heard a commotion. From beyond the meadow came the barking of a dog and a chorus of meow, meow. Is it those cats again? Said Peter in alarm, ducking behind a tree. An Irish setter raced into the meadow, barking for all it was worth. Right behind were a dozen cats with bows and arrows. Yes, riding on the backs of bridled foxes. The big black cat at their head was wearing a golden crown. At first, Peter thought the setter was leading the cats on the trail of their quarry. Then he realized, no, they're hunting the dog. As the cat with the crown rode by a large rock, his fox tripped and stumbled and the cat went flying. He struck his head on the rock and stayed still. The other cats gave up the chase and crowded anxiously around him. Then with the loud, mournful cries of meow, meow, they laid him over the back of his fox and returned the way they had came. Peter stood shaking till they were all out of sight. Then he nipped off home as fast as his wobbly legs would bear him. He found Father Allen at supper with his cat Tom, nibbling from a dish by the table. Father, it's about those cats. I was crossing a meadow and I heard a dog barking and all these cats crying meow. Meow, said Tom. Yes, just like that, said Peter. And then the cats came riding into the meadow on foxes, all of them chasing this dog. But then the cat with the crown fell off and hit his head and... Father, why's Tom staring at me like that? Father Allen put down his fork. Peter, I've warned you often enough about your wild stories. Now, if you come to me talking like this again, I'm going to have to let you go. Do you understand? But, Father, it's no story, I swear it. That's enough, Peter. Now, I'm sorry to ask you so late, but I have another chore for you. Mrs. Pennyweather has passed on suddenly, and tomorrow's the funeral. I need you to dig her grave tonight. So it was that Peter was digging in the graveyard by the light of the full moon. It was hard work, and he had to keep resting. And it wasn't until right around midnight that he had finished. Just as he was about to climb out, he heard a distant meow, meow, then again meow, and again meow. It's the cats, declared Peter. He scrunched down in the grave, then carefully peered over the edge. Coming across the graveyard was the black bishop cat, and behind him were 6 more black cats, carrying on their shoulders a small coffin. The box was covered with a pall of black velvet, and sitting on top was the golden crown that Peter had seen twice before. The cats walked slowly and solemnly, and at every third step cried, meow. Their path went right by the grave where Peter hid. And when they were but a few feet away, the bishop held up a paw for a halt. Then he turned and stared straight at Peter and spoke. Tell Tom Tildrum that Tim Toldrum is dead. Then he lowered his paw and the cats walked on, and at every third step cried, meow. Well, Peter scrambled out of that grave and bolted for Father Allen's. He pounded on the door, shouting, "Father, Father, let me in." At last the door opened, and Father Allen stood there sheepily and sleepily in his nightshirt. "Peter, what's going on?" "Let me in, Father, please. I'll tell you." Father Allen led him into the library, where Tom yawned and stretched on his cat bed. The priest lit a lamp. "Now what's this all about, Peter?" "Father, you've got to believe me. I was out digging Miss Pennyweather's grave when I heard a meow." "Meow?" said Tom. "Yes, just like that," said Peter. "And I looked and saw 7 black cats. One was the bishop, the others were carrying a small coffin with a crown, and they came right up to me, and the bishop stopped them and stared at me just like Tom there, and Father, why is Tom staring at me like that?" "Peter," began the priest, "but Father, I tell you, he spoke to me, and he told me a message. I'm to tell Tom Tildrum that Tim Toldrum's dead. But how can I tell Tom Tildrum that Tim Toldrum's dead when I don't know who Tom Tildrum is? Peter, this is the last straw. I warned you again and again." "Father, look at Tom! Look at Tom!" Tom was swaying, and Tom was swelling, and Tom was standing on his 2 hind legs, and then Tom spoke. "What? Tim Toldrum's dead? Then I am the king of the cats." Tom leapt toward the fireplace, and with a huge meow, he bounded up the chimney and was gone, never to be seen again. Have a good day.
There is an old Swedish saying that shared sorrow is half sorrow, and shared joy is double joy. Each week we experience many joys and sorrows, and we bring them to this community that our sorrows may be carried with the support of others and our joys may be magnified. In a few moments, you will have the opportunity to share your joys and sorrows in the chat, keeping in mind that YouTube is a public forum and that if you have a joy or sorrow that is too tender to share in print, to please just type I, as if you are raising 2 fingers in church. On this Sunday before Memorial Day, there is one great sorrow that we collectively share, the sorrow of those individuals in the armed services who lost their lives in war. Today, we remember them and grieve their loss. We remember those who joined the armed services by choice and those who had no choice. We remember those who fought in wars with just cause and those that had no just cause. We remember those who sacrificed their lives for wars they believed in, and those who sacrificed their lives for wars they did not believe in. We remember those who have gone missing and were never found. We remember those civilians who have died as collateral damage in wars. We remember the loved ones those lost have left behind. We pray for world leaders that they may make wise decisions that prevent wars. We pray for those around the world who are currently suffering the ravages of war. We pray for the peacemakers who strive for the end of so many conflicts around the world. We remember, and we pray for peace.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sun bright dew and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Because both of my stories are so short, I'm reading two from a collection, American Indian Myths and Legends, selected and edited by Richard Ordos and Alfonso Ortiz. The first is The Creation of the Animal People, an Okanagan story. The earth was once a human being. Old One made her out of a woman. Yes, you will be the mother of all people, he said. Earth is alive yet, but she has been changed. The soil is her flesh, the rocks are her bones, the wind is her breath, trees and grass are her hair. She lives spread out, and we live on her. When she moves, we have an earthquake. After taking the woman and changing her to earth, Old One gathered some of her flesh and rolled it into balls, as people do with mud or clay. He made the first group of these balls into the ancients, the beings of the early world. The ancients were people, yet also animals. In form, some looked human, while others walked on all fours. Some could fly like birds, others could swim like fish. All had the gift of speech as well as greater powers and cunning than either animals or people. But deer were never among the ancients. They were always animals, even as they are today. Besides the ancients, real people and real animals lived on the earth at that time. Old One made the people out of the last balls of mud he took from the earth. He rolled them over and over, shaped them like Indians, and blew on them to bring them alive. They were so ignorant that they were the most helpless of all the creatures Old One had made. Old One made people and animals into male and female so that they could live and breed and multiply. Thus all living things came from the earth. When we look around, we see part of our mother everywhere. The difficulty with the early world was that most of the ancients were selfish and some were monsters, and there was much trouble among them. They were also very stupid in some ways. Though they knew they had to hunt in order to live, they did not know which creatures were deer and which were people, and sometimes they ate people by mistake. At last, Old One said, "There will soon be no people if I let things go on like this." So he sent Coyote to kill all the monsters and other evil beings among the ancients and teach the Indians how to do things. And Coyote began to travel on earth, teaching the Indians, making life easier and better for them, and performing many wonderful deeds. This story was reported by Ella Clark in the 1950s. My second story is from the Navajo, the creation of the first man and first woman. Late in the autumn, they heard in the east the distant sound of a great voice calling. They listened and waited and soon heard the voice nearer and louder than before. Once more they listened and heard it louder still. A moment later, 4 mysterious beings appeared. The white body, god of this world, blue body, the sprinkler, yellow body, and black body, the god of fire. Using signs, but without speaking, the gods tried to instruct the people, but they were not understood. When the gods had gone, the people discussed their mysterious visit and tried without success to figure out the signs. The gods appeared on 4 days in succession and attempted to communicate through signs, but their efforts came to nothing. On the 4th day, when other gods departed, Black Body remained behind and spoke to the people in their own language. "You do not seem to understand our signs, so I must tell you what they mean. We want to make people who look more like us. You have bodies like ours, but you have the teeth and feet and claws of beasts and insects. The new humans will have hands and feet like ours. Also, you are unclean, you smell bad. We will come back in 12 days. Be clean when we return." On the morning of the 12th day, the people washed themselves well. Then the woman dried their skin with yellow cornmeal, the men with white cornmeal. Soon they heard the distant call, shouted 4 times of the approaching gods. And when the gods appeared, Blue Body and Black Body each carried sacred buckskin. White Body carried 2 ears of corn, each covered with grain. The gods laid 1 buckskin on the ground with the head to the west, and on this they placed 2 ears of corn with the tips to the east. Then they told the people to stand back and allow the wind to enter. Between the skins, the white wind blew from the east and the yellow from the west. While the wind was blowing, the Mirage people came and walked around the objects on the ground 4 times. And as they walked, the eagle feathers, protruding from the buckskins, were seen to move. And when the Mirage people had finished their walk, the upper buckskin was lifted, and a man and a woman lay in their place. The white ear of corn had become a man, the yellow ear the woman. It was the wind that gave them life, and it is the wind that comes out of our mouths now that gives us life, and when it ceases to blow, we die. The gods had the people build an enclosure of brushwood, and when it was finished, the first man and first woman went in. The gods told them, "Live together now as husband and wife." At the end of 4 days, first woman bore hermaphrodite twins. In 4 more days she gave birth to a boy and a girl who grew to maturity, and in 4 days lived with one another as husband and wife. In all, first man and first woman had 5 pairs of twins, and all except the first became couples who had children. In 4 days after the last twins were born, the gods came again and took the first man and first woman away to the eastern mountains. The couple stayed there for 4 days, and when they returned, all their children were taken to the eastern mountains for 4 days. And the gods may have taught them the awful secrets of witchcraft. Witches always make masks, and after they returned, they would occasionally put on masks and pray for the good things they needed, rain and abundant crops. Witches also marry people who are too closely related to them, which is what first man and first women's children had done. After they had been to the eastern mountains, however, the brothers and sisters separated. Keeping their first marriage a secret, the brothers now married women of Mirage people, and the sisters married men of the Mirage people. But they never told anyone, even their new families, the mysteries they'd learned from the gods. Every 4 days the children bore children, the women bore children who grew to maturity in 4 days, then married, and in turn had children every 4 days. In this way, many children of the first woman and first man filled the land with people. This is based on a legend reported by Washington Matthews in 1897. A little note here, it is very common in origin stories around the world for the first people to be hermaphrodite, or bisexual. Religious scholars have been trying for years to find an explanation, but have not yet succeeded.
Long ago in the Korean countryside, there were a husband and wife who had lived a long life together. Their home was small, and they had little in the way of wealth, but they were mostly happy. Their only sorrow was that, although they had hoped and prayed for a child for many years, they had never been blessed with one. In their old age, they comforted themselves with the love they had for one another. The couple were friendly with the single man who lived on the farm next door. They helped one another with some of the bigger jobs on their 2 farms. Over the years, the couple couldn't help but notice that their neighbor was a little greedy. He always wanted the best tools and always took the biggest share when they harvested together. They shrugged off his greediness, hopeful that he would change one day. The couple loved their small farm, especially because it was nestled next to a beautiful forest. In springtime, they enjoyed searching for wildflowers and loved to hear the birds sing. One spring day, while the husband was sowing seeds in their field, he noticed an especially beautiful bird song. The notes were crisp and clear. He felt as though it were calling to him. "Come here, come here." He couldn't resist the sound of the bird. He set down his tools and followed it into the forest. Each time he came close, the bird flew off again. He followed it, further and deeper into the forest. Finally, the bird stopped. The man saw it alight. The branch where it rested arched over a beautiful little spring that bubbled and gurgled in rhythm with the bird's song. He sat down to enjoy the private symphony. When his ears and heart were full, he prepared to return home. He was thirsty, though, so he leaned over the stream to enjoy a good long drink of the fresh spring water. How refreshing it was. He bowed in thanks to the bird, stood up, and began to walk home. The water had been even more refreshing than he first thought. His legs felt longer and stronger, and there was a real bounce to his step. When he arrived home, his wife looked at him oddly. "What is it?" he asked in a voice that was unusually clear. His wife answered slowly, "The frog in your throat is gone. You are taller, you look stronger, and your wrinkles have disappeared." The husband felt his arms. They were as muscular as they had been many years ago. "It must be the spring," he whispered, and with awe in his voice he told his wife about following the bird. She responded slowly, "You are young again. That bird has led you to the fountain of youth." The next morning they agreed that life would be best for them both if the wife also drank from the spring. They made their way into the forest, and what did they hear? They followed the sound of the bird all the way to the spring. They enjoyed the symphony. The woman drank her fill of the water, and as she walked home, her step was light and sprightly. She had become a young woman once more. Not many days had passed before a neighbor came by. When he saw the young couple, he demanded, "Who are you? Where are my neighbors? You look exactly like they looked 40 years ago." When he realized they were indeed his neighbors, he demanded to know their secret. They'd barely begun to tell him about the spring. He hurried off into the forest. He didn't come back that evening, and the next day when he still hadn't returned, the couple began to worry. They made their way back to the spring. Instead of a bird song, they heard a baby crying. It was a little boy, none other than their neighbor. "He drank too much," said the husband. "We can't leave him here," said the wife. She bent down, picked up the baby, and carried him home. He was the baby they had hoped and prayed for, and they raised him with love. Some say the boy grew up to be a generous soul.
Dona, Nobis, Pacem, Pacem. Dona, Nobis, 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 Pacem, 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 Pacem. Dona, Nobis, Pacem.
Please join with me in our closing words and words for extinguishing the chalice as they appear on your screen. The blessing of truth be upon us. The power of love direct and sustain us. And may the peace of this community preserve our going out and our coming in from this time forth until we meet again. Amen. Go in peace.